I'm Brittney, a producer for NBCLX. For the past few months, I've been tracking my family's ancestry. For me, DNA has told the story about the past. But I know my African lineage started before slavery, and I wanted to find out where. So I took another DNA test, this time through African Ancestry. This Black-owned company traces maternal and paternal lineages of African descent and can find the specific countries and ethnic groups we belong. So I hopped on a call with its co-founder, Gina Page, to find out how they are able to get these results and why this test is so important to understanding who we are.
African Ancestry is able to get specifically to an ethnic group because that was our goal for creating the company. So other companies can't do it because their goal was not to inform people of African descent of the real useful, the tangible information about their roots. And we look at the branch of your family tree whose DNA does not change significantly over thousands of years. And so in your case, Brittney, we traced your mother's line going back 2,000 years using what's called mitochondrial DNA that does not mix and change over generations. So when we trace maternal lineages, mother to mother to mother, we find that 92% of the people that take that test receive an African result. When we trace paternal ancestry, we find that there's a 65% chance that the result will be African. So the question is, why do we find African ancestry more often on a maternal line than we do on a paternal line? And that is because of the history and behaviors of white men during the transatlantic slave trade.
Normally, when we try to trace our genealogy, we take DNA tests and look through piles and piles of documents to trace our roots. But for African Americans, a lot of times we end up hitting a wall, and that's thanks to slavery. The U.S. Census did not start including free Black Americans by name until 1850, while all Black people weren't included by name until 1870. So tracing their lives and finding their names can seem nearly impossible. Professional genealogist Nika Sewell-Smith knows just how tough these roadblocks can be.
I found 3 slave schedules. It's normally only the slave owner that's mentioned, and then by name, and then it marks down for each slave, but their name is not on there.
But when you start to dig through these records and you get to things like the slave schedules, where the literal humanity and autonomy of these people has been stripped away because you won't even list them by name, that's one of those things where I can see where folks I gotta take a break. Because for you, right, you're looking for this ancestor. You have it come up as a hint that someone has saved the slave schedules. You go to it and you look and you're like, well, wait a minute, there's a bunch of blank lines, but there's only one name listed for all these blank lines. How do I know that that's her? You don't know that it's her, because the slave schedules, while they count enslaved people, they're really a census of slaveholders. And then their documentation was connected to capitalism. So you have to imagine, is there a possibility that it was in their benefit? You think about when would it have been in their benefit to document me?
Yeah, it's a lot to reckon. I'm thinking about things I never thought before, especially when I'm figuring out my ancestors. I'm like, okay, they were really slaves. I'm thinking about the treatment they went through.
Right, and navigating that, right? And the fact that we are the product of that, we are the residuals of that. So when people make statements about, and especially in absolute terms, right? That didn't happen. My ancestor didn't do that. And we're all looking at our DNA results going, then explain this, right? Mm-hmm. Explain that. If that's not what happened, we are the living proof that it did.
So white men were fathering brown babies much more often than white women were having brown babies. And so it's the history of enslavement and institutionalized racism that created this system where there are very few records for us to use to trace our ancestries. But when it comes to getting to the African roots, the trail goes blank, because we were stolen from Africa and we lost everything that identifies who we are. So when we were brought here, we were stripped of our names, and there goes one of the main pieces of identity and identification that we use when we do research.
It's a reckoning that we have because it brings it home in a way that watching 12 Years a Slave doesn't. It brings it home in a way where even watching Roots does not do it. When you learn history through the vantage point of your ancestors, especially if you descend from formerly enslaved people, when all of these holidays and commemorations come around, you have a unique vantage point to not just say, oh, we're celebrating Thanksgiving. You're thinking about what was it like on that plantation for them when Thanksgiving happened, or what was it like when the New Year came or Christmas came.
Brittney, it's time for us to unveil your maternal ancestry. And as you know, we traced your mother's ancestry all the way back 500 to 2,000 years ago using your DNA. In your case, we traced your maternal lineage to the continent of Africa. We found it on the west coast of Africa in 3 countries that are actually very close in proximity to each other, very close geographical proximity. So the first country that we found your maternal ancestry in is the country of Liberia. Within the country of Liberia, there are several ethnic groups. The ethnic group that you share ancestry with is called the Pele people. Liberia is the neighboring country to a country called Sierra Leone. Those people are called the Mende people. Sierra Leone has a special connection to the state of South Carolina and Georgia, both states actually. South Carolina and the Georgia Sea Islands were where rice plantations were. The third country is Senegal. You seem to have some familiarity with Senegal. Why are you nodding your head?
I saw when my mom and some of her siblings took like a DNA test before they found Senegal listed in their DNA.
So I was pretty excited to see Senegal for you because the people that you share ancestry with in Senegal are called the Mandinka people. And one of the things that we know about the Mandinka is that there's a group of Mandinka who are called the griots, and they keep the oral history of the community. So the griots are the storytellers, they're musicians, but they are telling the story of the families. They're telling the stories of the lineages. And I know how much research you've been doing into your family. And as a journalist, you are not just reporting, but you are also sharing stories about communities. And so that seemed to be a pretty cool fit for you.
This is like really kind of cool. Like, I don't like a year ago, 2 years ago, I never thought that I could actually learn about where I'm from. And I actually feel like I'm a part of something now. And I'm part of a community. This is a different feeling. It really is.
We deserve to know who we are. Knowing where you're from is critically important to knowing who you are. And so you deserve to know. And when you know, it provides a foundation that allows you to handle life's events differently. Tracing your ancestry is an act of resistance, and it's an act of liberation. And that's what we're about today. We're about doing what's right for us as the global African diaspora. And knowing, it starts with knowing where exactly in Africa you come from.
When I started filming this process, I thought I would just fill out my family tree, maybe find out the names of some of my ancestors and where they were located during slavery. But what I actually got out of this was so much more. Being able to pinpoint on a map where my lineage actually started gives me the sense of belonging and power I don't even think I've had before. I've learned just how resilient my people are, and that resilience is something I see in each generation of my family today.